This video will help show how to create a pie or circle graph while also highlighting some of the key functionalities of spreadsheet software, in this case, Google Sheets. First thing that you'll need to do is download this example file and make sure that you have the example 1 tab selected. So as you can see, there's 4 different tabs at the bottom. Sometimes when you download it, it may open to a random tab. So just make sure that this example 1 tab is selected. Problem 1, we can see we have a column A that has the amount of car accidents that are reported for 50 customers of a local car insurance company, and we want to make a graph that shows the percentage of customers that fall into each risk category. So for this particular problem, I've broken it into 3 parts. Part A, we're going to determine the most appropriate type of graph, either a circle, sometimes referred to as a pie chart, a bar graph or histogram, or a line graph. Under part B, we'll go ahead and create our frequency table for 4 different risk categories. A low risk customer being someone that has 0 accidents, medium risk customer having 1 to 2, a high risk customer having 3, or very high risk for 4 or more accidents. And then part C, we'll go ahead and use our spreadsheet program to create the graph that we chose. So first we need to determine for our data, is it most appropriate to create a circle graph, a bar graph, or a line graph? So we can see that our data involves car accidents, and we're going to be arranging those amounts of accidents into different categories. So when you have categorical data like this, more often than not, you're going to be creating a circle graph or a bar graph. Line graphs we usually don't use because those are time sensitive. So that would be a case where if I was looking at the number of accidents, say, in 1 month versus another month, that would be more appropriate for a line graph. Here, because they're asking for the percentage of customers, that's a hint that a circle graph would probably be the best choice because pie charts or circle graphs are best used to show percentages. However, we want to make sure that we're correctly using that pie chart. And that would mean that each slice is going to be separate from one another. In other words, I'm not going to have the data value fall into more than one category. Here I can see, because of how it's divided, either I have 0 accidents and I'm low risk, or 1 to 2 and I'm medium, 3 accidents I would be high, or 4 or more I'd be very high. So there's going to be no data value that could be shared between the various categories. So that's a good indicator that a pie graph or circle graph is going to work best. So let's first answer why we selected the pie chart or circle graph as our graph of choice. So I've typed in my response, and you can see that in this particular cell, it got cut off. So I had a longer response than the size of the box that was given. So to fix that, if you look in the top menus, there's a menu here for text wrapping. It looks like 2 bars with an arrow pointing to the right. And if I select that menu, I then want to select the wrap option, which is in the center. So if I select wrap, that will allow my response to be fully seen. And essentially the end of the box will then move the next line to also be visible underneath. So anytime that you have kind of a title or a text-based entry that goes beyond the edges of your cell and you still want to see the rest of it, you can select that text wrap option. So here I wrote a circle graph is most commonly used for showing percentages. However, the categories need to add to 100%, and no one data item can be in more than one category. Since each person cannot be in more than one risk category and all categories will add to 100%, a circle graph can be done. Now moving on to part B, I need to fill in my frequency table. So I essentially need to count up how many zeros I see in my column, then how many 1s and 2s, and so on. And right now, that's going to be kind of tricky because all my zeros are mixed in with all the different numbers in my column. So counting them, I might pretty easily make the mistake of miscounting the number of zeros. So one way to make that task a lot easier is to sort our column. So all the zeros are together, the 1s are together, and so on. So how I would do that is I'm going to select the column by clicking on the A. So when I click on A, you can see the entire column got highlighted. And I'm going to click the Data tab here on top. And there's a couple different options for sorting. So sorting a sheet is not what we want in this case. That would mean the entire spreadsheet's going to get switched around based off of that column A. So if, say, row 3 got moved to the top, then the row 3 for the entire spreadsheet will also be moved to the top. That's not what I want here, because all the other values in my spreadsheet I want left as is. So what we want is sorting a range. So a range is just whatever you have selected in the spreadsheet. So here I just want to sort column A. And if you notice, it says A through Z, not 0 through whatever. But it means the same thing. So A through Z would mean my lowest values are at the top of my list and then the higher values at the end. Or if I wanted that flipped, I could select the Z through A option, which is where the higher values were what my list would start with, and then the lower values would be at the end. So here we want the first option, sort range by column A through Z. So now we can see that my values in column A got resorted. All my zeros are together, all the ones are together, the 2s, 3s, and so on. And this is going to make counting those values a lot easier. So for the zeros, I can see that my first value of 0 happened in row 1, and my last value of 0 ended on row 24. So in this case, it makes it really easy. I know there's exactly 24 zeros in my list. So I'm going to click on the cell where I want to type in that 24, and then I'm going to type it in and hit enter. So when you type in a value like that, your spreadsheet essentially treats it like a text entry, and it'll keep it exactly like whatever you typed in. Now for medium risk, I want 1 or 2 accidents. So I could go through and count each one individually, but again, that's a pretty long list. So we want to do this faster if we can. So I can see my zeros ended at row 24, and my 2s ended at row 44. So what you can do is take the end of each of those categories and just subtract them. So 44 minus 24 is 20. So I know that there's a total of 20 values, including the 1 and the 2 together. So I would type in my 20 and then hit enter. 3 accidents, there's not that many, so we could count that by hand. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 values of 3. So again, I'll click on the cell, type in 4 and hit enter. And then very high is 4 or more. So in this case, it's just 1 value of 4, 1 value of 5. Combined, that's 2 values. So I would type 2 and then enter for that particular cell. Now for the relative frequency, how we calculate that is the number of values in my category, in this case 24 of our 0 accident data values, divided by our total amount. So we know that there's a total of 50 customers in our data list. So I could go ahead and type that into a calculator, get my value, and then just type the value in here as text. However, the nice thing about spreadsheet programs is that they essentially function like calculators too. So you can give it a calculation and it can perform that calculation for you and reveal the result. So it's really powerful for that, and that's one of the main uses of spreadsheets. So here I want to go ahead and utilize that calculation property. So what I would do is click on the cell where I want the calculation to happen, and I'm going to use this equal sign. So as soon as you type an equal sign into a spreadsheet program, it knows to now function like a calculator and to calculate whatever operations it gives you or you give it. So here I'm going to type in 24 divided by 50 on my keyboard. And then when I hit enter, it'll show the result in that cell. So my result was 0.48. And then I could do that for the rest of my entries here in the table. I could do equals 24 divided by 50, equals 4 divided by 50, equals 2 divided by 50. But another very powerful part of Excel is the fact that it's really good at doing repeated calculations if you know how to type them in. So here I want to take advantage of that, and rather than typing in those calculations over and over again, I want to be able to speed this up and have the calculation kind of happen on its own. So to do that, we need to change what we typed in on our previous list. And instead of using 24, instead I'm going to click on the cell where that 24 is living. So if you click on it, you can see it gets highlighted and it automatically puts the name in our calculation. So that location is column D, row 18. And then when I hit enter, I can see I'm still getting that 0.48 value. So now we're going to use that fast calculation functionality of the spreadsheet software, which is called the copy down feature. So if you click on a cell that has the calculation that you want to repeat and you move to the lower right-hand corner, you can see that your cursor changed. It moved from an arrow to this little skinny black plus sign. So while it's in that kind of skinny black plus sign mode, I'm going to hold down my mouse and drag down to all the different cells that I want that calculation to be repeated. And you can see that very faintly around all those boxes is kind of like a dashed line. That's how I know what cells I've selected. And then when you release your mouse, you'll see that those values now are populated. So essentially what the spreadsheet program did is it took each of the cell locations, my 20 and divide by 50, the 4 and it divide by 50, and the 2 and divide by 50. And if I want to be really sure that the calculations were performed the way I wanted, I could double click on any of these cells and then just double check my calculation. So here I can see it took the location where my 2 was and then divided it by 50, which is exactly what I wanted. So hitting enter will allow me to exit and have that calculation be done. So now we have our table and we can move on to our last step, which is constructing our pie chart. So to do that, I need to select the table that we created. So I want to select all my different risk values, all my different frequency values, and all the different relative frequency values. So to do that, I'm going to click on the low risk or the top left of the values that I want to highlight. And then I'm going to hold down my mouse and I'm going to again drag to include all the values, all the cells that I want included in my pie chart. And when I release on the mouse, we can see that it's still highlighted. So once I've highlighted all those values, I'm going to go up to the Insert menu here on top, and I'm going to select the option for Chart. So when I do that, now on this right-hand side is the Chart Editor option, and we can see that what we got was definitely not a pie chart, and that's okay. So the spreadsheet software tries to anticipate what type of chart you want to create, and it's not always going to pick the one that you actually want. And we can change that very easily. So under chart type, if I click on that, it's going to create another drop-down menu for me, and I can scroll through my options and select the option that I want. So here I want a pie chart, and we can do just the simple option here, and we can see that it now changed my pie chart. So something to note is the graph essentially was just plopped on top of the center of my screen, which may not be where you actually want your graph to be. In this case, I definitely don't want it there. It's covering up other values and important information from my spreadsheet. So if you click on the white background, so don't click on any of the colored parts of your graph or any places where there's text, but just kind of like the white area. If you click on that and hold your mouse, you can now drag your chart to a different location in your spreadsheet. So here I'm going to put it underneath Part C. So the last thing we're going to talk about is how to edit this chart. So there may be parts of it that we don't want labeled or oriented the way that's currently being shown, and we can go ahead and change that. So the easiest way is to click on any part that you want changed. So for instance, if I want to change my title, I click on the title, and then it opens up this secondary menu that I can change that particular part. So I'm going to change my title. So here I changed my title to risk categories for car insurance customers. You can also do all of your standard editing, such as changing your font, the position, whether it's bolded, italicized, the color of the font, and so on. The other part that's meaningful to know is if we click through our menus here, the legend. That's the label. So right now it's kind of being written off to the side and some of my information is being cut off, which I don't like. So under position, I can change where I want those labels to be. Here when I put them at the bottom, it color codes it for me and I can see all of my labels very clearly. What I ended up losing out on though was my percentage amount. So if you go to the pie chart, you can select the label to include your percentage, your value, and so on. So these various menus will help you edit the different parts of your pie chart. And once it looks exactly like you want it to, there is the option to copy. So you can see that you can copy the chart, and now I can input it into a Word doc or wherever I want. So for example, let's say I was doing a report and I needed that circle graph. Here I opened up a Word doc. You just paste. Let me look for the option to paste here. If you paste what you copied, You can either link it or leave it unlinked, it doesn't matter. We now have a beautiful pie chart for our report.